how does a modern, educated nation spiral into unimaginable brutality? Today, we're going to trace that path, from a national crisis to the absolute horror of Nazism, to try and understand one of the darkest chapters in human history.
Our story starts not with politics, but with a family. It's the spring of 1945. The war is basically over, and an 11-year-old German boy named Helmuth is in his bed. He can hear his parents talking, their voices low and serious. His father, who was a well-known doctor and a Nazi, was actually debating whether to kill the entire family or just himself.
And this is the sentence Helmuth overhears that would haunt him for the rest of his life. His father's sheer terror of revenge. The very next day, after one last happy family outing, Helmuth's father went into his office and shot himself.
So that just raises this chilling question, one that's going to guide our whole explainer. What had Helmuth's father, and by extension, what had Germany, done that was so awful he believed this was his only way out? Well, to find the answer, we have to go back to the end of another war.
You see, the seeds of the Second World War were really planted at the very end of the First. Germany lost, and a brand new democratic government, the Weimar Republic, was born. But here's the thing. It was born into a nation that was just simmering with anger and humiliation. And this map right here, it perfectly captures that feeling of humiliation. Just look at it. The peace treaty they signed at Versailles literally carved Germany up, stripping it of incredibly important territories. This wasn't just about lines on a map. For the German people, this was a deep national wound. And the terms were absolutely crushing. Germany lost its industrial heartland. I mean, most of its iron and coal. It was saddled with these insane war reparations. And maybe worst of all, it was forced to accept the sole blame for the entire war. The politicians who signed the treaty, they were branded the November criminals, traitors who had stabbed the nation in the back.
So, on top of all this national shame, you get a total economic catastrophe. The new republic wasn't just hated by a lot of its own people, it was completely broke. And believe me, things were about to get a whole lot worse. This picture it's just hard to believe, but it is 100% real. That's a cart piled high with cash just to pay wages in 1923. To pay its debts, the government printed money so recklessly that the cash itself was practically worthless. This was hyperinflation, and it completely wiped out people's life savings, literally overnight. And it's so important to understand, hyperinflation destroys a lot more than just bank accounts. It destroys trust. Trust in the government, trust in the economy, trust in the future itself. It creates this deep, gnawing anxiety and a sense of total desperation. To put this into perspective, get ready for this number. By the end of 1923, it took 4.2 trillion German marks to equal just $1 US. Trillion! Can you imagine trying to buy a loaf of bread with a wheelbarrow overflowing with cash? That was the reality. Now, America had helped stabilize the German economy for a few years, but that stability was like a house of cards. When the Wall Street stock market crashed in 1929, all those loans just dried up. The German economy got hit harder than any other, and unemployment just skyrocketed. All of a sudden, you have millions of people who are jobless, hopeless, and desperate for any kind of solution. And this chart, this tells you everything you need to know about what happened next. Just look at the Nazi Party's share of the vote. In 1928, before the Great Depression really hit, they were this tiny, fringe party with less than 3% of the vote. 4 years later, deep in the crisis, they were the single largest party in Germany. That link between economic despair and political extremism, well, it's undeniable. It was right into this perfect storm of humiliation, fear, and despair that Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party stepped, and they offered a simple, powerful, and ultimately a horribly deceptive promise of salvation. You know, the Nazi promise really had two faces. On the one hand, it offered tangible things for a better life, like promising a people's car for the average worker. But on the other hand, it created these overwhelming spectacles of power and unity through these massive, perfectly choreographed rallies. It was a really potent mix of hope and intimidation. Hitler was a masterful public speaker, and his message hit all the right notes. He promised he would tear up that hated Versailles Treaty. He'd put everyone back to work, and he'd make Germans feel proud again. For a nation that was on its knees, this was an absolutely intoxicating message.
This comparison shows you exactly how Hitler's promise played on the failures of the Weimar Republic. I mean, look at the struggling democracy on the left versus what Hitler was offering on the right. The appeal is suddenly so clear. Where there was chaos, he promised order. Where there was weakness, he promised strength. Where there was endless debate, he promised swift, decisive action. Once he was in power in 1933, Hitler moved incredibly fast. That promise of a better future was built on a foundation of truly horrific racial ideology. Democracy was dismantled, and the systematic persecution of anyone they called undesirable began.
What's so critical to understand is that the Holocaust was not some single, sudden event. It was a process. It was a calculated progression. It started with laws to exclude Jews and others from public life. Then it moved to forcing them into ghettos. And finally, it culminated in industrial-scale mass murder.
This is what Step 1, exclusion, looked like in real life. A simple park bench turned into an instrument of pure hate. This shows you how the Nazis made persecution seem normal, weaving it right into the fabric of society, stripping people of their rights and their humanity little by little. And this is the result of Step 3, annihilation. Every single pair of shoes in this haunting image represents a life. A person with a family, with dreams, who was stripped of everything, including their own life, in killing centers like Auschwitz. The scale of it is it's almost impossible to comprehend. Which brings us right back to where we started. Spring 1945. Helmut's father, facing the utter defeat of the nation he had served, now understood the full scope of what he had been a part of. The reckoning had finally come. And this is the direct answer to our opening question. These are the crimes that Helmut's father knew the Allies would discover. A genocidal war that led to the systematic murder of millions, 6 million Jews and millions of others. Gypsies, Poles, political opponents, and even Germans who were considered mentally or physically disabled. You know, so many ordinary Germans were just passive onlookers. They were too scared to protest, or maybe they just preferred to look the other way. Pastor Martin Niemöller, who actually resisted the Nazis, captured this chilling silence with these famous words, reminding us how persecution thrives when good people decide to do nothing. And that leaves us with one final vital question. We've seen how this combination of national humiliation, economic crisis, and powerful propaganda led to an absolute catastrophe. The story of Helmut's father isn't just history, it's a warning about how fragile democracy really is and about the profound danger of simply looking away.